Good morning and welcome to this Sunday service with the Eno River Unitarian Universalist Fellowship. You were just listening to the music of American composer Arthur Foote, played by Sally Franz on the flute and Kate Lewis on the piano. There's more of that delightful music to come this morning. I'm Reverend Deborah Cayer, and whoever you are, wherever you come from, whatever your race, your gender, whomever you love, wherever you are on your spiritual journey, whatever the state of your heart and your mind, this first Sunday in June 2020, welcome, welcome. If you're visiting with us today for the first time, you can find out more about us online or through the link in the chat box, which is should be on your screen. We invite everyone to a virtual coffee hour immediately after this service, and instructions for how to get there will be again on the screen at the end of this service. Like most other congregations in Durham, we are going to be staying online for a while. Check our website at eNews for information, or you can contact our office if you're wondering about anything. ERUUF's board and coordinating team are working together to create a plan for the safe, eventual, gradual return to our campus, emphasis on safety. We appointed a task force and they have created a survey. You can find it in eNews, or you can find that survey on the ERUUF website. Please take a few moments and fill it out. We really want to hear from you. And also stay tuned. There will be listening sessions because we really want to hear what's happening and what's on your mind and in your heart about all of this. Thank you for your patience and your good humor if we have to work out any occasional technical challenges in this service. There have been a few these past several weeks, and I want to give a shout out to Jenny Jolly and Sean Trimble. Oh my gosh, are they just the most wonderful, wonderful people behind the scenes. They are really terrific. This morning's service is led by me and Reverend Stacy Grove. I want to just acknowledge that many parts of this service were recorded before the murder of George Floyd and the justice protests of this past week. And so if we seem to make some incongruous leaps this morning, say from grief to the celebration of our RE teachers, or in the music that's recorded for specific places in the service, please understand that some of the changes that the worship team would be able to make in person in the sanctuary are just not possible online. We wanted to honor the significant contribution and work that goes into creating pieces of music by our members. And so we've left some parts of the service as is. And yeah, so we're just gonna transition as best we can this morning. We're gonna all be holding a lot in our hearts, as we already are. We are really grateful this morning to Jocelyn Neal, Steve Franklin, Rob Bickley, Sally Franz, and Helen Wolfson and Eric Thomas, who each have created parts of today's music as a gift to the congregation. Kate Lewis is on the piano as usual. So now let's take a breath and let's center ourselves. And we're going to continue this morning with a piece again by the American composer Arthur Foote. Arthur was an organist, and he was the head of the Guild of American Organists, and he was music director for 30 years at the First Unitarian Church in Boston. Sally is on the flute here, Sally Franz, and Kate again on the piano.
Hear these words by Lynn Marshall, followed by a responsive affirmation sung by Linda Hirshhorn. The video was put together by our own Jenny Jolly. Bertolt Brecht asked, "In these dark times, will there also be singing?" And he answered himself, "Yes, there will also be singing about these dark times."
But in these dark times, surely not now, with blood still staining the streets. Surely not now, with fires burning and when the people rinse their faces to ease the sting of tear gas and pepper spray.
Be still and listen. Hear the song rising, rising from a shout to a roar. Hands up, don't shoot. Hands up, don't shoot. I can't breathe. I can't breathe. I can't breathe.
The rehearsed songs will come tomorrow or the next day, but with the tears of rage and grief flowing, voices breaking in memory of the choked efforts, I can't breathe. This is the song. This is the song about these dark times.
We light our chalice, beacon shining brightly from our sources and our principles, the inherent worth and dignity of every human being, each and every one of us, part of the interconnected web of life.
In these hard times, there will always be singing, always be singing. In these hard times, in these hard times, there will always be singing, always be singing. In these hard times, in these hard times, there will always be singing, always be singing. In these hard times, in these hard times, there will always be singing, always be singing. In these hard times, in these hard times, there will always be singing, always be singing. In these hard times, in these hard times, there will always be singing, always be singing. In these hard times, in these hard times, there will always be singing, always be singing. In these hard times, in these hard times, there will always be singing, always be singing. In these hard times.
There will always be singing. And so no matter what happens, together we are able to keep on. Come and go with me. Our next song you might want to sing along with.
Land. justice in that land where I'm bound. There'll be singing in that land. There'll be singing in that land. There'll be singing in that land where I'm bound. There'll be singing in that land. There'll be singing in that land. There'll be singing in that land where I'm bound. Come go with me to that land. Come go with me to that land. Come go with me to that land where I'm bound. Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land where I'm bound.
I am so excited to be here this morning with Julia Tyler, our Director of Religious Education for Children and Youth. Good morning, Julia.
Good morning.
It's a great morning. This is the day that we get to recognize our teachers, our advisors, our mentors for our religious education program, and we're so excited to do that. Every year, we gather as a multi-age community who just love to be together. We love to have fun and sing songs and tell stories and play games and ask questions. That's what we do here. And this year was no exception, but I have to say these last few months, oh my gosh, above and beyond. We are so grateful to all of our volunteers in our program who've just come up with such creative ways to stay engaged as a community on a journey together. Bravo, you guys. We are so grateful. In any given year, our programs begin with wonder and awe and reverence. Oh my gosh, that's just the place we begin. And then we encourage questions. We encourage our kids' questions. We ask questions. We encourage them to come up with their own questions because in our tradition, we do not put things into our children's heads. Yeah, we'll share facts, and yes, we'll share examples, and yes, we'll set up great learning environments. But what we're really about is trying to draw out, coax out that question or that wonder inside of each of them so that they can be on their own journey. So that's what we're trying to do here. We're trying to draw our kids out. Someone who understands this so beautifully is a friend of ERUUF, the Reverend Jean Nuiar. And Jean has this to say. Julia and I will offer this as a responsive reading. These are the words of Reverend Jean Nuiar. She says, "Let our conversations with children open them and us to ever wider circles of awareness.
Let them open up wider circles of spiritual life, spiritual joy, wider circles of faithful living.
Let them also give our children strength and hope and meaning for those times when they feel lonely and we cannot be there for them.
When they feel pain because of the cruelties of the world, when they feel guilt and shame and struggle for direction, when they face dangers from which they need more than human protection, when they feel grief and rage, as well as awe and reverence."
Mm-hmm. So let us have conversations that will ground them in faith, giving them songs and stories and images that make that faith accessible. And now Braxton and Julia will continue with this morning's ritual recognition for our teachers.
Over the course of this last year, a beautiful group of volunteers have come together to create vivacious, spirit-filled religious education programming. It is my great joy to work with these volunteers, people who care for our children and families, and who build the youthful spirit that we feel at ERUUF. A special thank you to all the religious education and Our Whole Lives teachers who devote a whole year, sometimes more, to caring for our children and youth. Let us take this moment now to honor all the ERUUF religious education teachers who've given their time and love to nurturing our children and youth this year. Our RE teachers are opening minds and growing hearts. They are instilling strong moral compasses, self-confidence, resilience, and compassion. They're helping raise children with critical thinking skills, excellent questions, and capacity to get through difficult times, like what many of us are experiencing even now. Our religious education teachers are tending our children's ethical, personal, and spiritual development in a very tangible way. It's invaluable work.
This morning, we recognize all those who taught, assisted, coordinated, and supported religious education programming. We extend our gratitude to RE teachers, coming-of-age teachers and mentors, elementary, middle school, and adult Our Whole Lives facilitators, middle school youth group advisors, and high school youth group advisors. Thank you. We especially lift up those volunteers who committed their time and energy to our children and youth for this full year, every other Sunday, our RE and our teachers. In celebration of this beautiful and big gift to our community, we will now share a video of all the people who taught religious education and Our Whole Lives this year.
Teachers, mentors, and facilitators for religious education, we have gifts of succulent plants for you this year. These succulents symbolize the tender, vibrant lives you've nurtured this year, despite ideal conditions. Succulents can live and thrive in difficult environments like the desert. This spring, you teachers have found creative, resilient, and resourceful ways to nurture our children and youth through droughts of friendship, stability, and routine. Our families have faced many hard challenges this spring, and you have provided gentle tending for them. We expect next year religious education will be full of surprises and change, as it has been this spring. But whatever RE looks like this fall, we will continue to adapt and carry on the important work that is RE. Please reach out to me or Braxton if you'd like to join us in religious education this next year.
Having a little technical difficulty here. Oh my gosh. All right. All right. Sorry, hold on. So here we're back. Whew. In a recent meeting, an online meeting, Stacy mentioned how often she's been noticing that people have been talking about what they've learned these past 2 months, and how often people say that they are going to do something differently when this is over. And that this is true whether people have been rigorously quarantining or whether they have not had the luxury, the privilege of staying at home. Whatever our differences, wherever we are in terms of socioeconomics, gender, racial identity, this experience has definitely got our attention. We've all been suffering. And when we hold our suffering consciously, it opens us. It helps us feel our compassion and find our empathy. As the novelist Rita Mae Brown puts it, sorrow is how we learn to love. We notice this and we name it, not because we like walking on the dreary side of the street, but because this is where our search for truth takes us. Stacy also observed that Jews have just celebrated Shavuot, the festival of weeks. It's a festival 50 days after Passover. This was originally a celebration of the barley harvest, but it also celebrates the giving of Torah on Mount Sinai to Moses. Jewish holy days all begin at sunset on the evening before, and some people spend the night, the whole night, reading and sharing insights from Torah. This is their way of participating in ongoing revelation in honor and in reverence for how Torah was revealed to Moses. It can happen in our lives too, if we show up. Today is, in Christian tradition, it's Pentecost. It's been 50 days since Easter. The Christian holidays are layered right on top of the Jewish holidays, which were in turn layered on top of old agrarian holidays and holy days. So it's been 50 days since Easter, and Christians are celebrating Pentecost by recalling the stories about the disciples who, after Jesus' death, were driven by their terror and their grief and their despair into hiding. At which point, after 50 days, the stories say that the Spirit descended upon them and they were given the gift of being able to understand each other across their differences. And so this too is a story about revelation. One way to interpret the story is that as the first disciples worked through their terror and their grief, they found new meaning, and they eventually found love and solidarity with each other. Sorrow is how we learn how to love. So what might revelation be for Unitarian Universalists? This morning, we're going to look through a liberal religious lens at what's been revealed in Minneapolis and Louisville and Brunswick, Georgia, after the murders of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and Ahmaud Arbery. But first, we have a hymn. It's called Tranquil Streams. It was originally written in the 1930s as the Unitarians and Universalists shared resources and began their work together. And it was sung in 1961 when the two traditions finally did merge. A freedom that reveres the past, but trusts the dawning future more. We don't often sing this, but I requested this hymn this morning for that one particular line. The words are on the screen if you'd like to follow along or if you'd like to sing along.
As tranquil streams that meet and merge and flow as one to seek the sea, our kindred hearts and minds unite to build a church that shall be free, free from the bonds that bind the mind to narrow thought and lifeless greed, free from a social code that fails to serve the cause of human need, of freedom that reveres the past but trusts the dawning future more, and bids us all in search of truth adventure boldly and explore. Prophetic church, the future waits your liberating ministry. Go forward in the power of love, proclaim the truth that makes us free.
Many of you may have heard of the term apocalyptic times. We hear it most often as the final end of the world. But apocalypse actually is a Greek word meaning revelation, an unveiling or an unfolding of things not previously known and which could not be known apart from the unveiling. So what is being revealed to us now? At a time when it seems only this pandemic has the global capacity to shake up all the constructs that we are living within. It's hard to imagine there would be a global shutdown that would stop most everything from its normal rhythm of daily life. And yet, here we are, living this sudden reality. How are we learning to adapt to a new normal? One that keeps shifting as we learn more about this virus. What are the ways we've been living our daily life, socially, economically, spiritually, that no longer serves for the common good? Just as the prophet Joel said, in the last days it will be that I will pour out my spirit upon all flesh, and the young will see visions, and the old will dream dreams. I wonder how people will collaborate in their communities and globally within these constructs, or not, to support one another moving through this very turbulent time, to live into the visions and the dreams of a better future. I don't mean the end of times like total mass destruction, evil, and all of that, although forms of that possibly exist as tensions rise with major change and fear grasps our senses. I'm pondering the end of a cycle of time, one that opens a door, making space for creative collaboration in new ways, with potential for a new time that provides better justice for all, honoring more intently the inherent worth and dignity of all life, dismantling racism and disparities with a love that truly embraces all differences. What is the potential for new understanding with awakened consciousness that propels us forward through these turbulent times? With courage and conviction for a better world, how can we co-create the future together?
My colleague, the Reverend Erica Hewitt, points out that this week, after George Floyd suffocated under the knee and full body weight of a Minneapolis police officer, outrage has become the language of our public lamentation, and with good reason. She points out that this was a 21st century lynching, and it was not an isolated act of violence, of white violence. It's what's been happening to Black and brown people, and especially Black men, for centuries. So let's just sit together and breathe. And in honor of the sacred memory of those who have been beaten and bound and lynched, all those whose dreams have been suffocated for the color of their skin. And as a public witness in the chat box, I invite you to write the names that you know of people of color who've been killed because of white violence. A riot is the language of the unheard, Dr. King told us. And he continued, and what is it that America has failed to hear? It has failed to hear that the plight of the Negro poor has worsened over the last few years. It has failed to hear that the promises of freedom and justice have not been met. And it has failed to hear that large segments of white society are more concerned about tranquility and the status quo than about justice, equality, and humanity. And so in a real sense, our nation's summers of riots are caused by our nation's winters of delay. Dr. King, more than 50 years ago. And yet, some of us have still delayed, and there is much for all of us to grieve. And we avoid this emotional work at our individual and collective peril. And so this morning I say, if you are a person of color, take care of yourself. Tell your story, claim your anger, don't let go of your truth. And when you've wrestled, as Jacob did with that terrible angel in the night, don't forget to claim your blessing. Your true name is beloved. And you have a choice. If you wish, when you're ready, you can put down your suffering and you can enter in carrying the fruit, the harvest, the sweet, sacred truth that you are already fully, truly wanted and truly welcome in this new country, even if some of the residents don't yet know this. No one's ignorance, no one's arrogance can alter this truth. If you identify as white, this is a moment to wrestle with the terrible angel of privilege, this terrible angel that attends your identity. For more than 400 years, racial violence has been at the core of our nation's history, and people with white skin have benefited, some more, some less, but all have started farther forward on the starting line than people of color. All have carried less of a burden that would slow their progress. All of us, Black, brown, white, all of us have inherited a terrible legacy from our history of enslavement and the genocide of Native peoples. The price of white privilege is that white people are required to remain unconscious about the sources of their relative wealth, required to remain unconscious about the lived experience of people of color. But when we are unconscious, we cannot fully love. We cannot accurately think or make decisions. We cannot accurately tell when we are being played and taken advantage of. We cannot tell that the planet is being exploited, that our children's future has been sold to pay for our comfort. Our ignorance is making us terribly ill. As Ibram X. Kendi points out, we have metastatic racism, and it is literally killing America. We'll pause here for now. We'll rest in this truth, and we'll rest in the meditation that Stacy has for us this morning.
Spirit of life and love, we give thanks for this time and place of renewal. These are troubled times. All around us, people are hurting, without jobs, hungry, confused. People are angry as they witness unjust actions upon others. Some recovering from natural disasters of recent floods and tornadoes. Amidst many protests throughout our country, we hold in our hearts the families and friends of those who have been treated unjustly. Most recently, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, others named here this morning in the chat, and others still unnamed. Amidst sickness and death, so many are grieving the loss of loved ones. In our own community, we hold in our hearts this morning Ann Verdine and Lisa Jones in the recent death of Ann's mother after a long illness. Amidst uncertainty that feeds fear and anxiety, teach us to consider how others experience the world, to understand differences in my reality and their reality. Teach us to listen for shared feelings and to be open to hearing differences. Give us courage to face judgment and hatred for the greater good. Spirit of hope and love, guide us to do our work, to be generous with our heart and spirit, to be strong in our vulnerability, in our not knowing. Where we feel resistance and fear in our lives, may we look toward love as our guide. May we remember, we are not alone, but connected to one another through shared humanity and love. As we walk into the world this week, help us to notice the pain, but not to live in it. Guide us to act, to stand in solidarity, to be the light of hope in the world and an embodiment of love. May it be so. Ashe, Amen.
We have metastatic racism, and it is killing us. Our life-threatening illness comes from our unacknowledged history. And still, communities of color suffer more. This week, Dr. Elias Ortega, president of Meadville Theological School, pointed out that as a nation, we seem to continually fail to resist this evil. As a nation, we opt instead to ask communities of color to remain calm and to hold on just a little while longer. But how long is enough? And who gets to decide? If you guessed that the answer is not just the people with privilege, you're correct. And if you're wondering how and where to begin, here's something to consider. Paulo Freire was an educator who worked with the most marginalized citizens in Brazil. His work was rooted in his deep belief that every person, regardless of their social location, carries within themselves the image and likeness of God. In other words, every person has inherent worth and dignity. Freire also understood that everything and everyone is deeply interconnected. He understood this at a time when very few people thought this way. Amid atrocious racialized injustices and the dehumanization of Brazilian lower class citizens, Freire was committed to an equitable, horizontal process of dialogue in which all people are treated as equals with equal respect and dignity. He understood the poorest of the poor as active agents who are capable of naming their own needs and figuring out the solutions to their own problems. He said that to be in this kind of a relationship takes humility on the part of anyone with resources. It asks those with more to let go of their personal agendas, their certainty that they know the right way, that they know the correct path to the future. And what's more, Freire discovered that these radically egalitarian relationships led to solidarity across differences as people began to recognize each other as subjects, each in their full humanity. Each became both teacher and learner. Each was in a relationship that was alive with faith and with love and with justice. Freire understood that these relationships were a kind of a dialogue. But to be in this dialogue truly, those with more resources must develop greater humility. Freire wrote, "Dialogue cannot exist without humility. How can I dialogue if I regard myself as an I and others as mere it's? How can I dialogue if I consider myself the owner of truth and knowledge? How can I dialogue if I'm closed to, even offended by, the contributions of others? Self-sufficiency is incompatible with dialogue. At the point of encounter and dialogue, there are only people who are attempting together to learn more than they know now. Paulo Freire. When we're in this kind of egalitarian relationship, we begin to shift from seeing others as a means to our ends to seeing others as unique and precious individuals. And this is a unique and precious opportunity to be in spiritually alive relationships. This is how we begin to move from isolation and separation to solidarity, as we experience each other's inherent worth and dignity. We experience the ways in which we are truly interconnected. The contemporary spiritual teacher Richard Rohr says that to truly be in solidarity, people with privilege have to move themselves off of dead center, off of that place that we've been taught is our rightful place if we are in that group. Rohr says, authentic solidarity requires our voluntary displacement from our positions of privilege, whether it's been race or gender or class or physical ability or nationality or religion. We have to move towards someone who is not like us in some tangible way. We continually trip and fall all over our privilege until we get the hang of this more equitable, egalitarian way of being in a relationship. But solidarity is not a one-up, one-down relationship in which I am helping you. Instead, solidarity is a commitment to travel, to learn, to be in relationship, to grow together. The good news is that we can learn the skills for solidarity and right relationship. We don't have to go to a fancy or exclusive ashram. The teachers are everywhere, and they don't cost a dime. The psychologist Roger Walsh says, if we choose to, we can see everyone as our teacher. Confucius was very clear about this. He says, when walking in the company of two men, Confucius said, I am bound to be able to learn from them. The good points of the one I copy, the bad points of the other I correct in myself. Walsh says that people who have admirable qualities can inspire us, and those with destructive qualities can remind us of our own shortcomings and motivate us to change. And so to begin the practice, we choose a time such as a morning or as, the daytime hours. And during that time, we imagine every person that we meet is a teacher who's bringing an important lesson. Walsh says, your challenge is to recognize what that lesson is and then to learn as much as you can from this person. And at the end of the day, at the end of the time period, look back and review your interaction with each person, the lesson each one brought, and claim what you've learned. As you practice, every person becomes a teacher and a reminder of our spiritual nature, while every experience becomes a learning opportunity. In this way, the world becomes a sacred schoolhouse that's designed to heal and awaken us. Roger Walsh. We are in this apocalyptic moment. We would benefit from all the teachers we can find and all the wisdom we can distill from them. Right now, we could choose to pass along a new story of health and wholeness to our children and grandchildren. We can do this if we're willing to see and hear the truths that people are speaking, crying, chanting, screaming about their lived experience in the streets of our nation. We can support them by joining and donating to the movement for Black Lives, or contributing money to the bail funds that have been set up around the country for Black and brown protesters who've been unfairly arrested, and also for their allies. We can support movements that are working to finally abolish slavery as its patterns echo throughout all of our institutions today. You can find places to donate on the UUA website, on websites of organizations like Standing Up for Racial Justice, and for others. We'll get some onto the ERUUF website too. We can choose that path, or we can choose the old story of metastatic racism, in which a few elites who are winners take all, and everyone else is a loser who hasn't earned or who doesn't deserve adequate health care, housing, food, or employment. If we choose this story, if we continue to choose this story, chaos and destruction will continue, and will continue to divide along the lines of anyone who is not like me, not like my people. In this story, privilege is the coin that staves off having to do with suffering and sorrow. What kind of bargain is that? Can we find the courage to sit with our sorrow? Can we let our grief inform us, form us inside, change us, transform us, so that in turn we can act for change? Even as we're choked by our outrage and our tears, even as the world spins and tilts wildly and splits apart, can we find a way through the chaos to our deepest values and our greatest principles? When our action comes from these sources, it has great power. May we choose the path of love that leads to a story that is rooted in solace and solidarity. To get there, we must trust the dawning future more than the dead certainties of the past. May we choose love. Love has already chosen us. It is right there, waiting for us to help each other find our way home. Ashe, blessed be. Amen. I want to thank you for your generous financial support for ERUUF. We depend on our members for their gifts of time and talent and treasure now more than ever. Thank you. You've really been there. You've really come through. If you wanted to make a donation this morning, there is a link in the chat box. This morning's offertory is by a group called Constellation. We know them better as Helen Wolfson and Eric Thomas. This is an original piece of music by Helen, who is a composer in addition to being a certified music practitioner. She often plays the hammer dulcimer for hospice patients. This is a piece in the Celtic tradition. It's called She Wore a Spangled Hat. And this piece it's in a tradition called planksty, or it's a piece that pays tribute to a particular person. Due to HIPAA regulations, the person being honored cannot be named, but Helen finally recalls that this woman always wore a sequined hat. She wore a sequined hat when meeting with her visitors. Here is Constellation. We give thanks for all the gifts that weave together the fabric of this beloved community, especially the gifts of music so generously given by so many this morning. Our closing song this morning is a Dolly Parton tune. It's called Better Day. Dolly Parton is a woman who has amazing authenticity and integrity. She's a person who made it out of Appalachia, but she didn't go far. She stayed and she found solidarity with people and the land that she loves. She's quite an amazing person. This is her song, Better Day, sung by Rob Bickley.
Now, we don't know what heaven looks like, but we've seen enough hell right here and right now. It's when the road gets the roughest and the problems get the toughest. Well, the times are the hardest and that old sky turns its darkest. Well, you gotta keep your faith, 'cause I believe there's a better day. Them old blues are gonna roll right on away. I know they will. Listen to me. All those blues ain't sky and sea. Some of those blues bound to get on me. But the blues don't come to stay. They'll move away. Best of me, lift the shade, fix my gaze on a better day, clear the way. Better days just up ahead when sorrow ain't sleeping in my bed and people ain't messing with my head. There's a brighter day, there's a better way. Oh, there's blues that ain't sky to see. Some of those blues bound to get on me. But the future is looking bright. There's a better day, clear the way.
It's not here yet, but we live in hope. We live in hope. And in the meantime, we live in the midst of chaos, willing to see what's being revealed. Our closing words this morning are from Black America again by the composer and rapper who goes by the artistic name of Common. He says, you know, one way of solving a lot of problems that we got is letting a person feel that they're important. A man can't get himself together until he knows who he is and be proud of what and who he is and where he come from, where he come from. See Black people in the future. We wasn't shipped here to rob you and shoot you. We hold these truths to be self-evident. All men and women are created equal, including Black Americans, including Black Americans. Friends, we go today with love and deep commitment to be the vision of a just and equitable America that is welcoming and safe for everyone, inclusive of everyone, an America that yet can be. Go in love, go with justice, go with commitment. Go do this work. Amen.